Ladies and gentlemen, friends, colleagues, and listeners, here we are again, another weekend show. And Stephen, I can see from the lovely portrait behind and the picture that received quite a little bit of recognition from the other week, you're still back there at home in Malaysia. How are things over there at the moment?
I'm still at home, Chris. Yes, hello. Yeah, we're all fine. It's lovely to be with the family. I think if I had eloped, just a very short time after arriving, I would have been dicey for my marriage, let's say. And also, if I left it any longer, probably my dog, as well as my son, would disown me. But no, it's nice to be back. It's very different here, having spent the last few months in Europe, Chris, and some time with your good self that we managed to enjoy whilst I was in Europe, as well as the odd beverage and bit of sunshine together. It's very different here. We are still kind of probably 5-6 months at best behind most of the Western world. We are in severe lockdowns. Really, nothing's changed from 12 months ago. In fact, it's much worse. We're getting 30,000 cases a day, which in a population of 30 million people is pretty significant. I did say, in context, when we speak about the UK and Europe, that cases don't matter much. Cases matter, but actually it's the consequence of that case translating into hospitalization or a death, which is generally not doing so to the same levels. In fact, it's relatively insignificant now relative to where it was once before. That's not the case here, Chris. The healthcare system is bursting at the seams. Our worry, once again, is not catching COVID. Our worry is being frog marched under draconian style laws into public hospitals that are not now fit for purpose. I'm very saddened to say. And people are dying because they're going into hospital, not necessarily because of dying from COVID. So it's very different to just a couple of weeks ago when I was sitting on the beach in Mallorca or on my terrace in London, and it's slightly harrowing, I guess, to think that we've not moved on from where we were once before, and actually, I think we've regressed.
That's terrible, isn't it? And I know we've spoken about this so many times, and you've always stood by the difference between the haves and the have-nots, and why is there a different sort of hierarchy of decision making that spreads things around and doesn't have this seesaw effect all over the world. It really is such a shame, huh?
Well, I think it's very stark now, and it's felt much more pointedly than it might have been previously, because Malaysia in these parts, within Asia, within Southeast Asia, Asia Pacific more broadly, I wouldn't necessarily say Malaysia was being held up as the poster child, or the poster boy. Malaysia got some things wrong, as every government did, but certainly it was seen as acting relatively quickly, closing the borders quickly, having a pretty robust response to COVID, and a response that kept measures at bay. But of course, what's happened now is that's been completely reversed. It's been so much reversed, actually. I just got notification 1 hour ago from the UK Foreign and Commonwealth Office that Malaysia now is a country of which only essential travel is now permitted. So I'm wondering now, Chris, if that is the precursor to Malaysia probably going on to the red list at the next review. I would not be surprised, given that we're in the same kind of company as Cuba and Botswana, Eritrea, when it comes to caseload per 100,000. We are right up in the 600 or 700s per 100,000, which is pretty rotten, if I say so. Yes, look, the vaccine rollout, the inequitability of the vaccine rollout, and I've always talked about creating equilibrium and having a balance across societal constructs in various countries, and we have certainly seen the Western world progressing rather quickly at the vaccine rollout. I have to say that has benefited the Western world. I don't think it's wrong to sneer at the progress that these nations have made in vaccine rollout. In fact, far from it, they should be congratulated. However, there now is such a huge imbalance in progress being made in vaccinations in the 10 member states of ASEAN. Just look next door in Indonesia, it's a disaster. Philippines is a disaster. Thailand is a disaster. I took my wife, actually, one thing that works really well is when you do get called up for your vaccine, I took Ramani for a second vaccine today to the vaccination centre.
Brilliant.
And I thought I had time to go and do some groceries. However, just as I was sort of trying to turn at the car park, she texted me and said, I'm done. That was about 6 minutes after she walked inside. So there is no issue with getting the vaccine into people's arms once they're in the centres. The problem is that they're only using medical staff to vaccinate. They don't have the kind of the democratized rollout that a lot of other countries are using, like GPs and pharmacists or dentists, or the new phrase vaccinator has been established now, which is somebody that's not but any medical training or whatever, except they vaccinate people, which probably is good that nurses and doctors, I know doctors have to staff the centres because they have to be there for
action, etc.
Pharmaceutical, exactly. But wouldn't it be better if those nurses were focusing on the hospital care and so I do think there's some regard, but once you're there, you're in and out. So anyway, we went to the groceries together, which is far more preferable from my perspective anyway, because normally I'm accused of buying the wrong things or buying too much. I tend to focus more on these kind of sections of the supermarket where I can find fine beverages from Australia, like this little creatures that I'm drinking, rather than the broccoli or cauliflower that I'm supposed to be buying.
Yeah. No, I know exactly what you mean when it comes to that. But it is such a shame, isn't it? Because you would think that it's because the vaccines weren't available or the infrastructure, but it's down to just the way that they're doing it and adapting to it, which is such a slow response, which is, it's just terrible, Steve. So now we come back and we have a little bit of a reflection now on what's happening in Europe and especially the US, and everything seems to be it's a cautious optimism. The US is doing well. American carriers now reporting really good results, mainly because of the domestic market, but things are really starting to bounce back, which is now causing another major problem, which is backup staff, faster responses to urgent changes in schedule or opportunities for schedules to open. And dare I say, the fact that better technology to assist in all of that just isn't as fast as it should have been rolled out. And, even though it's been discussed for a long time, John Holland Kay's recent, statement there this week about how pleased he is and how fast it's going, but he actually called all carriers and GHAs and advised them, make sure you are prepared because this bounce back is coming back very, very, very quickly.
Well, yes, Chris. And nothing that will surprise us with some of the issues that are being felt across the industry, whether it's by the carriers or it's by the handlers or the broader sort of supply chain, because these sort of we call it the hammer and the claw. Yeah, we were up and down like the proverbial knickers in an Amsterdam side street, for quite a lot of the part of last year. So that hammer and claw was up, down, up, down, up, down. Pretty busy Friday night by all accounts. Airlines couldn't plan. Their service companies couldn't plan, and plans that were put in place were kind of. The minute they were published, Chris, 5 minutes later, they were out of date because the government kept it. So we thought introductions of traffic-like systems, which is not unique to the UK, by the way. All these governments across Europe have used similar systems or predicated on similar sort of insights and data, although we don't know the exact data points that are being used and what triggers a move from red to amber and amber to green and vice versa. However, it is pleasing, therefore, to see that two things have happened. One is there has been some clarity around the classifications of the or the categorizations of the lists, so to say. After every country moves, up a gear, either from red to amber or from amber to green, and of course, predominantly from red to amber, it didn't mean much before vaccines were accepted as credible alternative to quarantine, but it does mean a lot now when you've got the vaccine being accepted that if you are coming in from an amber list country, there no longer is quarantine requirement, and if you're coming in from a green list country, you don't need a vaccine either. So when countries move as significantly as that, you see a sea change in bookings and some of the numbers that we've seen. France, just last week, I saw numbers from the from ABTA, or one of the travel associations. I think it was ABTA. Don't quote me, but one of the travel associations, and they sort of 7 or 8-fold increase in bookings, not only quite a bit committed bookings. Now EasyJet, Ryanair struggling to get capacity back into these markets as quickly as they can. The North Atlantic, a very profitable market for the transatlantic operators, particularly the likes of American, British Airways, Lufthansa, KLM, etc. But let's focus on British Airways, American, because they have the joint venture business over the pond as well, and that has just gone gangbusters. But it's one way only now, Chris. It's US inbound to the UK. So isn't it somewhat ironic that I could travel from the Philippines, which is the UK red list country, directly into the US without any quarantine whatsoever or any vaccine whatsoever, but I can't still travel from the UK into the US, where caseloads, of course, in the UK are far lower, and the impact of the virus has been far better. So I think there's still a little bit of equalizing or sort of right sizing to be done, but some very good news we've seen in the last week, I would say. So yeah, I think John Holland K's appreciation of some of the changes is not to be underestimated, but I do think the industry will have to respond quickly, particularly now, as we've also seen, Chris, even Professor Lockdown himself, Neil Ferguson, said today that there no longer looks like a need for a winter lockdown as a result of the UK's success. And Professor Lockdown was the fella himself who'd published or had been pushing this angle for such a long time, right since the beginning. And so for him to come out with that as a member of the highly respected scientific advisory group for emergencies, the UK government, I think Professor Ferguson is onto something there. So I think that, coupled with the new travel light system, with the breakthrough in the vaccine, Chris, means that for the operators, they better start getting busy in recruiting, training, and not forgetting the need to maintain compliance and assurance at every possible step in the journey back to recovery.
Yeah. And it's, we said we hated that word, unprecedented. And but now the likes of Doug Parker of American Airlines, he's actually saying we're in the midst of an unprecedented recovery, which is fantastic. But it's also coming now with its own baggage and its own problems. And like you quite rightly say, this balance now between looking after cash flow and when you start ramping up the capability and the competencies of your people, that's now on everybody's table. So really needs to be moving faster now. It's incredible.
Exactly.
And Steve, the other thing that we've spoken about a long time, like somebody said to me the other day, that this is now a game of two vax. And basically they were talking about if you don't have your vacations, if you don't have your vaccinations, you don't go on your vacations. So there's such a big difference now and access for people who've had the 2 vaccinations. That in itself is a major incentive for people to get vaccinated.
Well, I think it is, and I have been fully vaccinated. We say this often, Chris. I have got no sympathy for those that are in some way kind of flying the anti-vaxxer flag, or trying to sort of push an angle that is predicated on false data or falsehoods. What I do object to, Chris, however, is people's choice to be vaccinated or not. So if and that is a liberty that I and being a conservative libertarian, something that I hold dear to my heart is that it's not for government to enforce mandates relating to people's health choices. However, I will do everything that I possibly can, personally, professionally, as a person of within the industry, that can help our industry get back on its feet. But I can't ever take away somebody's choice for whatever reason if they choose not to get vaccinated. What I think is clear, Chris, is that governments can decide, and they have decided for 50 years and more, who can enter their countries or with what credentials. That's perfectly plausible.
Yeah.
I still object to the prospect of vaccines for domestic business, going about your domestic affairs. I think that is fundamentally wrong, flawed, and illiberal, and it should be outlawed.
Yeah. No, well, like I say, we've had great chats on this, and we're going to have some more, I'm pretty sure, and face to face over a certain drink, brings out those differences. But there's a lot I agree with, but there's also now, and especially when you're talking about where you are, I think if people are told, I'm sorry, but you must do this, we'll all get out of this quicker. Listen, what do you think about the news that just came out recently about the about the waning of the benefit of some of the vaccines, and now that it looks like the AstraZeneca, because it's looking at a different type of
T cell. Yeah, I think
exactly.
that's really interesting. I mean, it's frustrating, no end. It was frustrating when we were discussing this, Chris. I think back in January or February, maybe February, when it first sort of was rolling out, and it was receiving lots of criticism from quarters in close to Brussels, Berlin, and Paris. And it's been proven now that, of course, that Macron and Merkel have made complete arses of themselves because they spoke without the benefit of the scientific data. And they were not alone. Italy followed suit, and amongst some others. However, it looks now that the AstraZeneca vaccine is the heroine of the and the darling of the vaccines that have been produced to solve this or help solve this, reduce the impact of this pandemic, because as I was reading a study from Birmingham University, I think that's the one you're referring to, that it has revealed that the T cell, whatever that is, I've got no idea what that is, but it sounds good. But I won't pretend that I know what it is, because I don't. And we've never shied away from telling our listeners that we're not experts in this area. But the whatever that T cell is, the response to that and the immunity that is built in there now certainly looks to be far stronger in AstraZeneca than any of the other vaccines. And interestingly, the other one that followed suit was I think Johnson & Johnson, because Johnson & Johnson is a vaccine of similar construct to the AstraZeneca, not the mRNA type vaccines that Pfizer there. So I think you get, the short message is, it's the study shows, and it's to be concluded, I think, but the interim results show AstraZeneca will give the longest protection without the need for a winter booster.
Yes,
which will hopefully save a lot more lives, and mean that we can continue the focus on the rollout to all the members of the population who are entitled or approved to get vaccines, rather than boosters for the elderly, who are the ones that got the vaccines obviously very early on when they were first rolled out.
No, it's absolutely brilliant news, and it's great. And also gives politicians an opportunity to reflect on jumping in too quickly just for impact and political reasons, rather than facts, which we've been speaking about for a long time. Now, talking about politicians jumping in and making a little bit of a fool of themselves, and history shows that they will continually repeat those errors or those the PR faux pas that seem to be lapped on in every single newspaper when somebody gets wind of it. But another man who's managed to hit the headlines, Mr. Sharma, 30 countries, 6 on a red list, and then showing that he mixed with everybody without wearing masks or quarantine. It's not the fact that if the information was distributed correctly in the first place, people might accept that there has to be certain exceptions for benefits to the greater good. But the way it's done looks as if people are putting themselves above rules, regulations, laws even, and that's what's really annoying.
No, they wouldn't do that.
Hard. Which then makes it very hard, to ask people to do things. And what you alluded to there is that, you think that there may not now be another lockdown, winter lockdown. I'm still a little bit hesitant on that, but I think the actions and the way he's done things and the way it's been allowed to come out does absolutely no good to anybody.
Yeah, sorry. If you, for those viewers on YouTube, you'll see I moved around there slightly. My dog got spayed yesterday, Chris, and for the benefits of the viewers. So she's in a crate. She's on sort of box rest, if you like.
Yeah.
So she is. I don't think she's too kind. She didn't look at me too kindly for taking her to the vet yesterday for her surgery. So I had a small issue to deal with there. So apologies for walking off. Alok Sharma. Look, that fundamentally, Chris, there is nothing wrong with exceptions. Let me make that very clear.
Yeah,
there has to be an exception to every policy for good reason, whether it's for critical care workers, or it's for haulage drivers, or it's for pilots and cabin crew, for example. So there's absolutely nothing wrong with an exception. Let me just put that on record, because that I think is what a lot of the British public will object to, is that it's one rule for one person and a different rule for us. Well, when I'm traveling in and out, there were different rules that apply to me. I was traveling in and out that somebody that worked overseas, and there were different rules for that at the time, and therefore you were able to avail of these policy exemptions. Pilots and cabin crew need to go to work, as do you expect your vegetables to be delivered, to the shelves in, I guess, Sainsbury's or Waitrose, Chris. I wouldn't suspect much less than that. But I think Kathy's probably more of a Waitrose girl than you, maybe. So I'm not sure, but without getting into your supermarket choices, certainly I would expect my Waitrose shelves to be stocked with fresh vegetables, and therefore these have to come from the continent. So you have to understand that there are exceptions for drivers to move back and forth. You have to understand that there are rules in place for ministers of government or for diplomatic conversations to happen. So if you can avail of exemption and it's for good, justifiable reason, I think that's clear. I think, however, the problem is that the message is always that, oh, we're all in this together, or we're all sort of sharing the pain, we're all sharing the burden, and it doesn't help that Alok Sharma's travel has come on the back of a couple of indiscretions from the government when Michael Gove was subject to a COVID contact and was able to get out of quarantine because he did the government pilot program for daily testing. Yeah, I think personally, daily testing sounds pretty good to me. I mean, that sounds logical and plausible and reasonable.
Exactly.
But it was the way it was communicated that was the issue, not the fact that he was actually doing it. I think that's a problem. The second thing was the Chancellor of the Exchequer and our Prime Minister then tried to shirk off the isolation because of another contact a couple of weeks ago, and they said, "Oh no, we're now joining this pilot that Mr. Gove was on a couple of weeks ago," and the British public went, bit of a poor show, really. That's not really in it together, because if that was us, we'd got pinged, we'd have to stay at home.
Yes.
And within an hour, they then said, "Oh, actually, we changed our mind. No, that's never going to happen anyway. And we're going to isolate. Of course we are." And I just think, actually, why were you not honest with people? You could say, "Look, I am the Prime Minister and I'm running this country. I will take a daily COVID test and we'll manage the risk accordingly. And therefore, if it's required for me to go to meetings and I need to mitigate the risk with these tests or with distancing or with masks in the office, I think that's perfectly reasonable, Chris. I want my Prime Minister at his desk doing his job that we pay him 150 grand a year to do. Not enough money, by the way. Pay Prime Minister more than that to get credible people into office. But I think that the public should want our ministers to be at work, as same way that we do want our soldiers and police officers and doctors and nurses to be at work. Therefore, there is nothing wrong with risk mitigation being in place. However, when you look at the optics of all of this, it doesn't smell right. So I think the problem is not what they've done or what they tried to do, it's the way in which they tried to do it. So Alok Sharma visited 30 countries in the last 12 months. He is the president of COP26. I think it's perfectly reasonable to be traveling to meet with foreign governments and prime ministers and presidents and ministers to get them on this climate change journey that Britain now is leading the world with our climate change commitments that were made, not just at the G7, but also prior to then. I have to say that Prince Charles has been banging on about it for 30 years and nobody sort of took much attention from him, but they're bloody paying attention now. Amazing.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Amazing. Amazing that Charles was ahead of the game here, and then he gets criticised by the great unwashed British public for speaking out about these matters when actually he seemed to know an awful lot more about it far earlier than the rest of us did. But hey ho, so he's involved in COP26. So I think that was fine, Chris. The fact is, there were 6 red list countries that Mr. Sharma visited, and he didn't quarantine, and then he went straight back into government business. And I think that is no. Well, I don't know whatever he was doing, but you know, the British public are being asked to pay £1,750 for quarantine and from a red list. That now increases to £2,250 from Monday. Quite what you get for your money, I don't know, but I've seen some images of the food that you get from the stinking Radisson on the Bath Road or some shithole like that, and I wouldn't be paying £2,500 for that. It looks absolutely awful. My quarantine experience here in Malaysia, by comparison, was delightful. Well, not quite half the price, probably 2/3 of the price, but therein lies the issue. It's not the case of the sort of the different rules for others. It's the case of them not being explained properly, in my view, and why those rules exist and why those exemptions exist and why they're being utilised. That's the failing of government here. It's not the fact that the exemptions exist.
Yeah, and I don't know, maybe some good will come out of all of this, where politicians will start to realise that people are not fools all of the time. And if you
just most of the time,
if you speak with a little bit of common sense and logic, that's what people want, and people will rally round people who make sense. So hopefully that'll happen. Now, something else we've spoken about, Steve, for some time is the effect and the impact of airports and what they do and how they've now, and again, in my just personal opinion, I'm not saying it's the opinion of everybody, but I genuinely now think airports and handling agents have got a chance now to really start to move themselves as a collective ecosystem and make a huge difference to what happens in those particular areas, to attract carriers, to attract customers, all sorts. And now I'm not sure what your opinion is of the Skytrax Awards, but nonetheless, the 2021 World Airport Awards are out now. And I don't think you'll be too surprised, but there are a couple.
Is it Doha?
It's yeah. So Hamad International Airport came top, which I think that would have been, if it was in a horse race, that would have been the heavy favourite. So HIA came top, then Tokyo, Singapore, Incheon.
Which Tokyo airport was it?
Haneda first, was in second, and Narita was in fifth. And then you got Munich.
I don't know. I don't know who votes for. I mean, well, actually, nobody votes. People pay generally for these awards because they fund Skytrax. But that's a joke. I mean, an absolute joke. Relative to what?
Well, exactly. But what I'm just saying, let me just go down to the final one. So you got
sorry.
Munich at 6.
Jumping the gun.
Don't worry. Munich at 6. Zurich at 7. Heathrow at 8. And then you've got Kansai at 9 and Hong Kong at 10. Now, I would say, just if I was to write them down, or, I would say that there's at least 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 that I would struggle with to put there, especially with how they all reacted and responded with regards to what people expect from this COVID pandemic and the way they do things. So, and like you said, I don't know how some other airports are not in there at all. It's I just think this now really widens the logic, probably with the exception of places like Munich and HIA, because we've spoken about them for some time, which has been incredible.
Chris, I just don't think this is worth the paper it's written on, or worth the paper they were printed on. Or in our eco-friendly world, the digital logo that you slap up against your airport brand, and you slap it on everything, and you put it on your website, all looks fantastic, but it's a complete ploy. It's an absolute ploy, and I just think people are looking at the wrong metrics. So I guess if you ask the customers what matters, I mean, I always find that Changi comes out top when I speak to customers, passengers, and everybody I speak to who's flown through Changi will just go, "Wow, that was just an amazing airport." And I have to confess, Changi is an amazing airport. But I will also tell you, and Changi Airport Group know this from those that I deal with from Siu Hang, the CEO, down to the operations team, that I give them an equally a hard time, because they are a difficult organization to deal with from an airline perspective, an airline client perspective, and it's a Changi way or the highway. But it's quite nice as a passenger to be able to avail of a swimming pool during a long transit, or actually the only airport that I know with carpet throughout the entire building, which is a pain in the ass for pulling your trolley bag, or rolling your Rimowa through the terminal, which I find deeply troublesome. I'd much rather have a sort of a simple stone screed, concrete screed, than the carpet, but the customers like that. So that's really good. They've got the jewel, they've got all that great stuff going on in Changi, which I think is fabulous as a passenger. But I do think, Chris, that some of the ones that you mentioned in there, I mean, even some of those the ports that were further in the list, the middlings, I find it quite peculiar, because I just don't see either as a passenger or a professional. And whilst airports and airlines have both been pushing pulling what levers they can to get customers back re-engaged with them and traveling. Again, I think that's all very well. I'm not really sure that this actually sways people to decide, oh, well, I must fly through Doha because they're the number one airport, or I must fly through Frankfurt, or sorry, was it Munich? It was number 5, whatever you said. I must fly through Munich because it's the 5th airport in the world. It's got the Skytrax award. It has no bearing whatsoever on a customer's choice, because the customer chooses basically either because of where they live, if they're an outbound customer, or if they're a transit customer, where the cheapest connection is, and who's got the best product for the airline. They don't choose which airport they'll transit through. So again, having lived and worked in Japan, I'm amazed that Haneda is there. That's astounding. But remember also the landscape, which is, this might have been conducted, is when there's no passengers. Yeah. And so when you've got very few passengers, your sample size is much smaller. But I do think that has a lot to be said about the airport's contribution to Skytrax. And let's leave it at that.
Yeah, no, fair dues. Now, any other news we should just cover, apart from, obviously, as people can see, I'm wearing or for those who don't follow rugby, I'm wearing the Lions shirt. So it's their 3rd test today, big decider. And, something that we spoke about right at the very beginning is how sports and management are very similar in the tactics and the approach. And, the Lions did so well in the first test, and then they sat back a little bit and played a very, very different game last time. And I think now, this 3rd one, they've got to attack. And I think that's also a little message with regards to this bounce back and how do we build back better. Now is the time to attack the issues rather than sit back and wait, because if people wait now for too long, there'll be a stop-start, there'll be another start, and then there'll be too much pressure on everybody, and that will also knock everything back, and it'll knock the confidence back again of the consumer, because they'll just be waiting to see when everybody is actually ready.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I think confidence is everything, Chris. I think people having had one holiday cancelled last year, or another rescheduled, or a difficult experience with trying to get a refund. I mean, I heard of one customer today, they've been waiting for a refund from AirAsia here for 18 months, which is just incredible. Customers cannot be expected to bankroll airlines. I think that's completely wrong. On the other hand, I do completely understand why airlines have offered credits rather than refunds to passengers. Totally understand that. And I think, as Julia Hartley Brewer said yesterday, when she was having a discussion with Paul Charles, I don't know if you've listened to Paul Charles, but Paul Charles runs the PC agency, a travel-related PR agency, who's done an awful lot of great work, actually. I must call out Paul for all the work he's done for the industry in the UK, with Airlines UK and the AOA and Bar UK. Paul's done some really good stuff there. But Julia's point was I'm all very well to understand that my flight will be cancelled, and I'm happy to take a credit, but I will only now book on airlines or for accommodation that will give me a credit. I don't want my money back. I accept you keep the money, it's fine, but you must give me a credit. And so to see people like Qatar still giving Chris the plus 10% on the credit awards, I think that's really generous and really good of them. So I think they'll do really well. I heard Jet2 have done some really good stuff out of it. British Airways have been amazing when it comes to. I know you've got different experiences sometimes with British Airways, Chris, but they have been really, really good. I've flown with British Airways probably more in the last 6 months than I've flown with British Airways in the last 2 years, and that's saying something because you know how often I fly. And I found all the changes I've made all free of charge, all with the guarantees, and all really, really, really positive. So I think confidence is one thing about the health sort of landscape, but the confidence in the market to do the right things, I think is actually probably the one now, as we're seeing the cases improve, is what will drive consumer behaviours going forward.
Yeah, 100% agree. And I've got to say, Steve, just to back up there about the British Airways, just recently now, it's been incredible. I must say it's been incredible. So I've got to give credit where credit's due. But something happened this week, and we received a message. Me and my wife received a message about a particular thing that we committed to, and we didn't realise the deadline was this weekend. Now we got the message at 5:30 yesterday, and within that half an hour, just by replying to it very quickly and getting an automatic message back, I then sent an email to the backup team, and within 10 minutes, and I've got to say this, and I don't normally go. There's a gentleman called Ed, who, if I meet him, I'm going to tell him exactly how brilliant I think he is, but also the company. And I know, it's not about advertising or whatever, but there's a company called Simpson Travel. I have been absolutely overwhelmed and bowled over at their responses, support, and just the speed that they offer, how to help. It's been incredible. So if anybody in the UK or anywhere else where Simpson Travel are covered or offering holidays, they are an exceptional alternative. So,
well, I think it is actually, Chris. We should be giving some of these people legs up, because it's the small players that kind of keep all the balls rolling, and the personal touch is really important when things go wrong. So if in equal measure, my travel agent is called Travel Leads. They've just rebranded to Venture, and they're based in Leeds, funnily enough, but Travel Leads is LEADS. But I would also say, Chris, these firms are suffering a lot because they're sort of at the squeezed end within the food chain, if you like. You think about how travel agents used to operate, Chris, on 9 to 12% commissions was the old days, right? 9% commission. When I used to write out these tickets at Service Air, going back to the 90s, writing tickets, I had a fare book. It was called I can't remember what the book was called, ITB or fare. Anyway, I forget now, but it's all the fares, and if you made a mistake, of course, the airline recharged the handling agent, right? But I remember you used to have to sort of tot them up and write them on your commission sheet, and 9% commission for issuing a ticket. This ticket might be Edinburgh, London, Stansted or City with Air UK, and that ticket might be an Apex fare. Remember an Apex fare? Yes. That might have been 400 quid. 400 quid to fly from Edinburgh to London. Can you imagine that now? We used to get just shy of 10% of that. So you got 45 quid. And if you do a few of those a day, I mean, it's all decent business, but because those days are gone, they're now non-commissionable fares for the most part, or dropped to 1%. So I do think travel agents are, and most people moved to digital a few years ago and they start doing things themselves and booking direct. But I hear you. I think we should call it the travel agents because they do a great job. And it's easy when things are fine. When things work really well, it's easy to book a fare online. But when things start to go a little bit pear-shaped, Chris, that when you pick up the phone, and I've done many times at 4 o'clock in the morning, and I've woken up, the girls from Travel Leads, Annette, and her colleagues. They pick up the phone on the out of hours number, and they're there to help. So I think they're fabulous.
Yeah, no, I agree, and maybe instead of some of these other awards, real time positive stories about companies that are doing a fantastic job and helping, and when you need a little bit of support and you think, oh my God, I haven't got the time to do this, and chase up, and you don't want to be waiting on press number 2 for this and number 3 for that, 5 for this, and then you get sent to a call center somewhere else who people can't even understand you. I just find that so terrible. And so these people who are there, and this
Totally.
gentleman straight on the end of the phone, absolutely incredible. And I'm going to be telling everybody about
Well done. Yeah.
travel, and like you said,
Yeah.
travel leads who I've also dealt with. So I agree with you there. It's brilliant. Right, my friend. Listen, I know you got
one more thing. One final thing I wanted to just finish on, Chris, was actually how the tables turn. Sort of looking at the recovery, and I'm just looking here. I saw the CAPA report out this week saying, showing Europe's biggest aviation market, Chris.
Yeah.
So the UK, of course, had held the crown for as long as I can remember, and the third largest aviation market in the world, punching well above its weight for a small island population. It's now Spain. Spain is now Europe's #1 aviation market, followed by, if you believe this is in Europe, up to you, but I don't, it's Russia. And the third is Turkey.
Yeah.
So amazing, sort of the shift there. And what you've seen is where people now are sort of hankering their travel and sort of nailing their feet to the floor in terms of committing to travel. And it's countries there, top 3: Spain, Russia, and Turkey. An interesting sort of mix, with the UK now coming up the rear at number 6.
Yeah, it's incredible, isn't it? Yeah, I mean that'll change probably with the opening of the US corridor.
Sure,
and everything. But, But yeah, Steve, it's nothing is as it was, and nothing will be the same again. And people now need to learn and do things differently, and not take things for granted. So yeah, onwards and upwards, mate. I look forward to speaking to you next week. Thank you so much, as always, and to Salem, and take care. And I'm glad you haven't sold that picture behind you yet.
Cheers, Chris. This one's for you.
Cheers, mate. Thanks.
Take care.